Hi guys, and welcome to another Wargame Red Dragon video, and this time we're going to be looking at the supply vehicle. Now there's two types of supply vehicle in Wargame Red Dragon: supply choppers and supply trucks, and then there is your forward operating base, otherwise known as your FOB. And I think we'll have a look at the FOB first of all, so we'll get rid of those. So all nations, as you can see, have a FOB, and they are all identical. So we'll get the Japanese one out. I don't know why they have a picture of a Jeep, but that's the picture they have with their FOB. They're all identical, and they all carry a whopping 16,000 litres of logistics, and they are the best value for money that you can get as far as supply is concerned. FOBs are basically used to refill your supply trucks and your supply choppers, and importantly as well, they act as a supply for your artillery pieces. Now when you think about whether you're going to get a FOB or more than one FOB, you need to think about your deck choices really, and the length of the games you like to play. For example, if you're going to play a long game, you're going to be wanting maybe at least one FOB, maybe more than one FOB. If you use a lot of artillery, you're going to be wanting a FOB, and perhaps again more than one FOB. But if you play just a short game, you need to weigh up whether you want to get a FOB in at the start of the game to cost you 75 points, or whether you want to spend that 75 points on something else and not have a FOB in your deck in very short games like 20-minute games. FOBs also, interestingly, have a high strength of 20, which means they can stay alive a long time even when being fired at directly. So they can take a lot of punishment basically before they're destroyed. So that's the FOBs. Next, the supply trucks. Just get the vehicles up. So your supply trucks vary in speed, availability and load capacity. The cheaper ones you tend to get a few more of, and they carry less supply, and the larger ones you tend to get less of. They cost a little bit more, but they do carry more supply. Now they are very vulnerable, these guys, to enemy fire. They are not hardly any of them are armoured, and if they're spotted and fired upon, they're pretty much gonna die or at least take a lot of damage. Now, have you seen in the tutorial on command and supply unit management, which is worth looking at either before or after you have a look at this video, then you'll see that if destroyed, supply units will in fact explode, damaging any unit close by, and can also cause nearby supply trucks to explode, even causing a chain reaction. So in other words, don't clump together. Now supply trucks, as you can see here, 150 Ks, are pretty fast on the road, but generally, not always, but generally they're not so fast off-road and do get stuck a lot from punctures and just getting stuck in the mud and stuff like that. They tend to get delayed if you put them off-road to go somewhere. They have unlimited, you can see the autonomy, not applicable. They have unlimited movement and they never run out of fuel. So these are all the trucks on the left here. Now every nation has got a supply truck, and some nations have got a choice of 2 supply trucks, and of course if you have coalitions you'll get more of a choice, and if you do a blue 4 or a red 4 deck then you get even more of a choice. So we'll have a quick look at the first one. This is the most basic kind of type. This is the Alvin Stalwart. You can see the Brits, you can see it's got no armour at all, and it's only got a strength of 5, so if that's hit by an artillery piece, or if an artillery piece lands near it, it's going to get destroyed. So you need to keep that out of harm's way. It's amphibious, so you can have a look for that. So if you want one that can cross rivers or even oceans, you can get an amphibious supply truck. They will supply ships at sea, so these will actually go up to a ship at sea and will supply that ship as well if you really want to do that, although they are very, very slow in the water. And you can see that the Swedish one pretty much exactly the same as the British one, and then they've got this one for the Japanese. It's actually 5 points less, but only carries 500 units of supply, whereas the British and the Swedish one carry 800 units. So basically you get what you pay for. There's a Danish Juniper that looks really old-fashioned. It's like some sort of World War II truck. The South Korean Cargo, similar to the Chigawa. in stats. And then you've got the Danish, you've got a choice of 2 here. Now, if I have a choice of 2 like this, I will always go for, and I'll show you why, I'll always go for the more expensive one. Now, the reasons for this are, you can see the stats are pretty much the same. This one's slightly better off-road, the more expensive one. So it means it will go across country a little bit better. The supply obviously is a lot higher, but the main reason I would get the more expensive one is because they've got a strength of 10. And whereas the 10 pointers have only got a strength of 5. So these can take sort of a close by artillery shell and they will still survive and you can still move them out of the way. Now the other reason I like the slightly bigger trucks, even though you get less of them in your deck, is that you don't have to micromanage them so much. So you can bring one of these in, it's got 1700 litres of fuel. So these have only got 500, and 500 litres doesn't last very long, so you'll be forever microing them backwards and forwards, or you'll just end up dumping them somewhere in the battlefield. And it's a similar choice with the Americans. I really like these Hemps. Let's get rid of that, and we'll just get the Hemp up. I really like these Hemp. They carry quite a lot of supply, 2,400 litres. That's I think it might even be the biggest amount that a supply truck can take. And you can get these in the Blue 4 deck as well as the American deck. They actually are I think they might be the only, no, they're not the only one that's armoured. There is a Russian one I think that's armoured as well, but they actually have a little bit of armour and they've got a strength of 10, so they can take a little bit of punishment, and they're very good off-road as well. And I would definitely take those over the cargo. I think you only get 3 or 4 of them, so you've got to be careful, but you know, it saves you micromanaging all these smaller trucks as well. That's just my personal preference. Not everyone tends to go for that. And then we've got standard trucks here for the rest of the nations. And now this one for the Russians. Now the Russians, if I just scroll down a little bit, they've got 2 down here as well. So they've got 2 types of Ural. They've got this one, and they've got this one which holds slightly more, I think slightly more, and goes slightly faster off-road. But now in my Russian deck I've got this one, so I'll just get the Ural back up and pin that. Now I take this one in my Russian deck, and the reason again is it's got 10 strength, can take a hit, and it's got a little bit of armor all the way around. And it's also amphibious as well, so it's pretty versatile unit, this guy. Now it can only go 60 off-road, which isn't brilliant, and yeah, it's only got 500 litres of fuel in, so that's not brilliant either, whereas this has got 1,100. But I go for this for the strength and for the little bit of armour that can protect it if it gets hit by nearby artillery shell. Also, what I tend to use my trucks for, as well as sort of taking supply when needed, I use it mainly for supply for things like anti-tank gun infantry in towns and in hedge lines, but also for anti-air missile units. Now anti-air missile units generally don't have many missiles. They'll have like 2 or 4 or something like that. They fire them fairly fast, and one fly past by a few planes, they'll be empty. So it's good, if you can manage it, to have one of these sitting not on top of your unit, because otherwise if it is hit and it explodes, it will take out the anti-air unit as well, but close by, so that you can refuel your anti-air missile units. And these things here, because they're a little bit armoured, they've got a strength of 10, are ideal, I believe, for that role. And if you go down, it's a similar story. You've got your West Germans here. I've got a choice of 2 here. Of course, if you've only got a choice of 1, like this French VLRA logistics truck, if you decide to have a French national deck, then you got no choice. You have to go with those and do the best that you can. So, moving on to the supply choppers. Now, the helicopters have the advantage of speed, really, but they are very vulnerable to anti-air, and if they're in the air, and they're also very vulnerable to artillery if they're on the ground. They're also quite big, a lot of them, so will be spotted quite easily by the enemy, whereas the trucks are a lot smaller. So helicopter supply should be left back from the front line, and the supply trucks that we spoke about before used to ferry supply to areas that are actually under fire, or to areas that are close to places where you know there's going to be enemy anti-air units and you can't take your choppers. Although it's easier said than done in a busy battle with all the microing that has to be done. Now the helicopters come in a range of sizes. with the larger ones carrying a considerably more amount of supply. So let's have a look at some of these choppers. Now I tend to sort of group them into small, medium and large. Something like this cargo, which carries 2,500 litres, goes very fast, 320 k's per hour. It's got a strength of 10, so it can take like a blowpipe or even a Stinger missile hit and will still survive. You'll be able to micro it out, hopefully. I'd call this like a medium-sized chopper. You don't get that many of these. I think it's like 2, 3 or 4 of these guys, depending on the decks that you try to use. The Chinook here, I would also call, it's pretty much exactly the same, medium. The Super Chinook, I would also, it's pretty much exactly the same again, medium. This South Korean one, medium. There's a lot of medium choppers. Even the British Chinook, I would call a medium one as well, even though it's only got 1,500 litres. Now this one I would call a small one. It only costs 30. It's only got 1,000 litres. And this one as well, I would call, the Japanese one, I would call a small chopper. Now the big daddy of them all is the only one that I would call a large chopper, is this big Mi-26. It is huge, and it is the Russian one, and you can get it in the Red 4 deck as well. It carries a whopping 6,000 litres of fuel, of logistics. So really it is a transportable mini FOB, if you like, as are all the helicopters really. It's got a good speed, but it is very big, I believe, so yeah, very big, so it is easily spotted, so you really don't want to be putting that anywhere near the front line. You want to be keeping it back. Maybe use it for artillery, maybe use it for resupplying your trucks, but I wouldn't put it anywhere near the front, because if an enemy spots it, it's worth 120 points and it's full of your logistics. They're just going to try and destroy that as soon as they can. Something like, then they've got the very small ones, like the Puma is quite small. It's only got 1,000 litres. That doesn't last very long. And the Russians have got these little Mi-4 cargoes as well with only 1,000 litres. Again, more than the trucks, but still, some of the trucks, but still not a massive amount. Now again, it comes down to whether you like to micro. I don't like to micro all my logistics around too much. I tend to take the medium-sized choppers, because if by any chance you do lose one, it's not a massive loss. Whereas if you lose one of the big, like the Mi-26, then if that's gone, then it's a big loss. But also these little ones, you know, they take a lot of microing around. The 30-point ones, for example, even the 50-point ones take a lot of microing around, the Pumas. So I tend not to take them unless I have to. For example, if I'm taking a national deck, then you might have to take some of the smaller choppers. Anyway, so the last category to have a look at is really the ships. So we'll try and get the ships up. So what have we got to go to? Navy. Roll. Get rid of those. Get rid of those. And we want supply. So, oh no, not supply. Supply ship. There we go. So there's only two. There's the American, or not the American, the Blue 4 LCU 1610. Strength of 60, so not huge, but okay. Although it will go down with some anti-ship missiles fired from a plane, so you have to protect these things. Poor stealth, so it's going to be seen quite easily. Speed, not magnificent, but it does carry a whopping 10,000 litres of fuel, and I think, if I remember rightly, you get 3 or 4 of these guys, so that's a lot of supply. And it's got some armour pretty much all round apart from on the top. And for the Russians, for the Red 4, we've got the Muna. The Muna is slightly larger than the LCU. It carries even more, 15,000, which is pretty much a FOB, minus a little bit. Quite slow again. Strength of 100 this time, so a bit stronger than the Blue 4 equivalent LCU. Now both of these guys can go up the river, so as well as resupplying your ships with weapons and repairing your ships as well. Of course, ships don't run out of gas because they have unlimited supply. These things can also go under bridges and along rivers, so they can even resupply your ground units if your ground units are in the vicinity of a river. So that can be very, very useful as well. Now lots of ships are very, very hungry for supply. So although you might think you've got a lot of supply with 15,000 litres and maybe 3 or 4 of these guys in your deck, but it soon goes down in a relatively long games, like say longer than 30 minutes. If there's a lot of naval action and you're trying to repair and resupply ships, they too take an awful lot of supply, and the bigger ships take a long time to repair as well. Also, the anti-ship war helicopters need regular supply, and you can use these, or you can fly them all the way back to your FOB to resupply your ASW helicopters as well. So that's it for the ships, I think. Just okay, lots of supply but pretty vulnerable, need to be protected. Again, air superiority key when using your ships. So in summary, what you prefer to use as supply is really entirely up to you. Now, I prefer to use choppers with some trucks for the AA and the ATGM infantry. So most of my general decks will have a FOB, one FOB, a card of the best trucks that I can get, and a card of medium-sized choppers. I feel this gives me like a balance for my deck without having to micro the units around too much. That's about it, guys. Thanks for watching this. Please do comment, like and subscribe. Tell me what you think the best supply units are, and I'll see you in the next video.